You see the wounded there. Get out there and bring him in. And the commander leaves, and this guy's still sitting there, and his partner sitting beside him and goes, did you hear the commander the first time? He goes, yeah. And without anybody knowing, he would open up this book called the Bible. And he'd look at the hour, and he'd look at his watch. The commander told him a few times, and he said, if you don't, I'll court-martial you. And he waited because he knew all of a sudden he was an atheist that did not believe in God, but he knew of a mother that was praying for him. She was someone that was willing to pray for her son. He waited for the right hour to come so that he knew. And I went out there when my mama is praying. Other times when it's all wonderful, he didn't care about God, but all of a sudden he was going to meet God. Then all of a sudden, it became very important for Mama's prayer. Are you willing to be that someone who's willing to pray for those missionaries who are in the foxhole? Brother Robert, I'm kind of busy, but you know, it's wonderful. These people pray and things like that. He said, but you see, I'm really good at making money the right way. God has given me a talent to make money just the right way. Not too many people know about me, Robert. Do you think God will use me? Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. In the 70s, my hero, he's in the state of California. He's doing a missions convention just like this one. And he presented the gospel like he knew best. And after the service was over, they took up the faith promise. Who has a faith promise card? Have they given those out, Pastor? Okay. They gave out the faith promise pledges and things like that. And in there, among the youth in that church, there was a 15-year-old boy. His name was Johnny. Johnny was not a normal kid. Johnny lived in a wheelchair. He was handicapped. He was mentally not all the way there. He had a lot of problems. But Johnny knew one thing he had going for him. He had a desire. He was a nobody. But in God's side, he was a someone. And the young people loved him, and so he took his pledge card and he wrote down everything and wrote a name and address and everything, and then time came to put in the pledge card, and he put it in there. And so when they went out to lunch, Johnny's dad was the head deacon of the church and all this stuff. And so when they were having lunch, and Johnny's dad took out the pledge form out of his pocket, and he looked at Johnny and he said, "Son, Dad cannot help you. What you have made a pledge for $1,500 for the whole year. Dad cannot help you with the missions pledge that you have made for Faith Promise." He looked at his dad and he said, "Dad, I never asked for your help." He said, "You put it back. That's between God and me." He said, "Okay, son. Okay." He put it in the offering plate that day, that night, and Johnny began to get to work. See, Johnny was a someone in the eyes of Jesus. Johnny began to get to work. He sold his Pac-Man, his VCR, his TV, and he would wheel his wheelchair in the neighborhood and knock on the doors and say, "Do you have your Coke cans and your newspaper? If you don't want it, can I have it?" "Why, Johnny?" "Because you see, I made a pledge for missions, and I made a pledge that to reach the lost of the world." And they said, "Can we have your Coke can and your newspaper?" They said, "Sure, Johnny." And they would give it, and Johnny would sell it, and he would put his money away in the brown paper sack, man, and he was getting ready. And that Saturday came for him to deliver his message. He took his brown paper sack. At those days they did it at the end of the year. They would give their pledge for him and things like that. And so they took it to his dad, and he said, "Dad, count it." And when his dad counted it, it was $1,500 that was sitting in that brown paper sack. And Johnny's dad looked at him and he said, "Son, how did you do it?" He said, "Dad, look at me, Dad. God has blessed me so much. He has just blessed me so much. How could I not do this for God? This one thing that I could not do for God is give Him a pledge of everything I've got to give it to Him for faith promise, for missions. Oh, he couldn't wait for that Sunday. Pastor, he reeled his wheelchair. He knocked on Pastor's door. He opened the door and he said, Johnny, how can I help you? He said, Pastor, I did it. He said, what did you do? He said, I made my pledge. And he looked at it and he said, how much is $1,500 for the whole year? He said, Johnny, how did you do it, son? He said, Pastor, look at me. Look at me. God has blessed me so much. I know I may be in a wheelchair, but oh, look at me. I can do so many things. Oh, Pastor, you know my heart's desire. I've always wanted to be a preacher, but you know I cannot be one because I can't talk very well. Pastor, you know I wanted to be a missionary, but I cannot go. I live in a wheelchair. But with this money, would you win one soul for me? That soul takes this gospel to the ends of the earth. He said, yes, Johnny, we can do it. We can do it. And so that morning, when they took up all the pledges and all the stuff, and at that year in Calcutta, India, there was a storm that came through and wiped out a kitchen in Calcutta, India, where hungry boys and girls would get their one meal a day in the school. And when it got wiped out, Mark Buntain, we called out to this pastor and said, Pastor, can you help me? And so he called this pastor in California, and the pastor said, Mark, I can help you. What do you need? He said, I've lost my kitchen. I cannot feed my boys and girls who come to the school for their free lunch. And he says, how much would it cost you? He told him the amount, and he said, I've even got you Johnny's money. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the little boys that used to go to that school in the 70s, his name is Robert Solomon. And he used to eat that one meal a day in the school in Calcutta, India. I do not know how true this can be, but is it Johnny's money that won a boy by the name of Robert Solomon, that he would take this gospel to the ends of the earth? If God can use a little Johnny, a someone that you've never met, he's in heaven today. We will meet him one day. But in God's sight, Johnny lived, in our sight, Johnny lived in a wheelchair. But in God's sight, he was a giant. Because he said, Jesus, I'll be that someone. Are you? He's not asking, can you sing? If you can, then you should be up there. He's not asking, can you preach? If you can, the streets are out there. He's asking, will you serve me? Will you serve me? Jesus, I promise today, I will proclaim your gospel. How many of you know there are 5 gospels? You're going like, you need to go to Bible school. Did you know that? There are 5 gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and yourself. And most won't read the first 4. You are the walking scriptures. And that's how you proclaim. That's how you proclaim.